I had been mayor about a year and a half on June 3rd, 2016, when the train crashed. And I was actually in Asheville, North Carolina, and I got a call from a guy who was staying at my house sitting, and he said, Arlene, I just heard and saw this thing and it's bad. And then while I was talking to him, he was watching the flames and watching the smoke, and there was nobody around. And so I pretty much had a play-by-play for the first long while, and then they started trying to evacuate things. So I was trying to make sure that he could find the cage to put the cats in and figure out what I needed out of my house. Because to evacuate when you're on the other side of the country and think about what you might need from the inside of your house, of course, is not so easy. Well, it was interesting, you know, after the derailment, I'm not sure that anger was my first emotional response. I think it's sadness and despair and frustration. But one of the things that came up right away, and I was still out of town, we held an emergency city council meeting because they were starting to clean and rebuild the tracks, and there were still these cars full of oil just dispersed all along the tracks. And our city had been pretty much occupied by the incident command and all the accoutrement of that. And so anyway, you know, I really started thinking about, you know, what we can do to try to heal for our town and heal from this circumstance. And one of the things I think that was the most profound about the whole experience, and actually Columbia Riverkeeper enabled this and sort of orchestrated it, was 5 indigenous tribal nations came to Mosier, and the native people went down to the river where the oil had gone in and did a ceremony. And it wasn't for press. In fact, no press was allowed. It was in their own language, but it was a real sacred moment. And I think it was a turning point for us in our community to transfer this frustration and anger and desperation and fear and anger to healing and how do we move on. And we really felt just, you know, wrapped in these wings of angels with the tribal nations. And in fact, with the railroad expansion that we've also been facing, it's the treaty rights that have been the most viable protection for us in our little community. So I think, like anything that happens in our lives, there are horrible elements of it. And as we all know with Mosier, it could have been a lot worse. But there are things that come out of it that are of equal and opposite measure, almost for everything in life. So I feel like the things that came out of it on this other side were of that pretty profound wonder. And part of that was with the tribes and really getting to know them. I almost felt like we took a hit for the team. Because it put a story on an issue that was flying right on over everybody's head for a long time about why did they want to expand the tracks, and what was all this oil expansion about, and what was the Tesoro Savage terminal about. And I believe, and I think a lot of us do, that if the crash hadn't happened in Mosier, the Tesoro Savage terminal may well have gone ahead. So I feel like it was an incredibly exciting thing to give a story that every community along the tracks, and that's UPRR tracks, that's BNSF tracks, that's tracks anywhere in the country where these hazardous materials are being transported, all of us are vulnerable. So we became a story. And one thing I think is, if we had had a lot of loss, we would have been really immersed in grief. But because besides displacement and a lot of carnage as far as staff in our town, I mean, almost everybody that was in leadership, except for me, kind of changed hands, I think, over the stress. but we kind of turned that grief or quote anger into action. And I basically said, universe, get my back, and I will give my life force to this and this cause. And one of your Columbia Riverkeeper staff, Dan Saris, who I very much respect, I basically, said to him, there's anything that you think where I should be, you tell me and I'll be there. And so my motto for the many, many months after that was just say yes. If I was asked to come speak, if I was asked to testify in Salem, even though it was a long drive, sometimes through city traffic, if I was asked to testify at the Port of Vancouver, and I was actually even asked to go down to San Luis Obispo because there was a Phillips 66 spur that was being proposed and pushed through. And our little Moisier story was enough that it enlivened the community there and a resistance, and that was stopped. So it was a really great example of the power of story and the power of being inspired by the collective of people who are working on these issues. And I think that was one of the things that I got to know much more of this whole community, the Power Pass Coal, the Safe Energy Leadership Alliance, Columbia Riverkeeper, people who have dedicated their time, energy, and life force in educated in scientific ways to try to educate people on what's really going on and stopping it. And so, yeah, that was pretty exciting to see that our story had wings and legs beyond us. With regard to when Washington State rejected it, the terminal, I felt like it's about time. I mean, come on. I felt like they made us suffer a long time. And I did feel like Inslee would eventually reject it. And I understood that he had a process where he wanted it to be done at lower levels, perhaps, so it wasn't some higher level decision. And maybe there was some real importance in that. But all along, I kind of felt in my heart that he would, when it came to it, that he would reject the terminal, but I just sort of wished he'd done it sooner so it would have let us work on other things. But no, I was not surprised. I was thankful and grateful and impatient. Well, one of the things, of course, that inspires me to keep fighting for the Columbia River, it's in my front yard. It's in everybody's front yard or backyard that lives along here. And it's the stunning, stunning beauty of this place that every day when I go around the corner from one facet or another in our community, in our region, I'm continually gobsmacked by the beauty of the place and the importance of nature and how important the quality of water is for all of us, and how many pressures there are all the time on these very things that are already diminishing. And I worry a lot about the diminishing baselines, and people look and go, oh, look, it's only 10% less salmon than last year, but last year was maybe 30% in the year before, but then it becomes 99.9% less than 150 years ago. So I think that those of us who recreate, who live here, it's our honor and it's our duty to be stewards of this place and to try to really do all we can to protect the resources here. And that's tricky because obviously the Columbia River, it flows through here. There's a lot that goes on upstream of our community, and that was just kind of the same. The river and the railroad are sort of metaphors of the same thing. If there's pollution that goes in way upstream, we might be dealing with the effects of it. So I think all of us now more and more are understanding that if we don't take care of nature, then we are actually annihilating ourselves as humans, and we've just got to shift to a different way of being on the planet where nature is most respected for giving us all that it does and sustaining life in this miraculous way. So